It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story.
All hell will break out in the Middle East. I think NATO should have 5%. We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Admonishing his allies, threatening his enemies, America's past and future president on the verge of his White House return. In an era of debt, but also war in Ukraine, Donald Trump tells NATO members, including Britain, they need to radically raise the amount they spend on defence. And the power of the presidency over technology's titans as Meta announces it will change the way Facebook checks facts. Also tonight, Elon Musk should crack on with getting to Mars, says the government minister that he's criticised as a rape genocide apologist over grooming gangs.
It's a ridiculous statement. I don't even know what it means, but it's a ridiculous statement.
Bailing out businesses and homes after the post-snow flooding in the East Midlands, with more warnings of winter weather tonight. The death of the far-right French stalwart splitting the country again, as some celebrate and some mourn the death of Jean-Marie Le Pen. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. For the past 4 years, it was possible to ignore Donald Trump's eruptions as the anger of a former president who never accepted he lost. Tonight, with him less than 2 weeks away from returning to the White House, he is challenging both enemies and allies alike. NATO members should pay 5% of their national income on defence, something that would dwarf the UK government's current spending problems. America needs Greenland and the Panama Canal, and all hell will break out in the Middle East if hostages aren't released by Hamas before he returns to power. In a moment, we'll hear from that region about the potential consequences of that threat. But first, from Washington, our correspondent David Blevins reports.
2 weeks from inauguration, he held a new golden age for America. But the president-elect wandered far off script. From the election...
They're still counting the vote in some areas. Can you believe this?
...to justice.
Nobody's ever won so many cases as I have.
And the environment.
The windmills are driving the whales crazy.
Donald Trump has often been critical of NATO and used this platform to urge European countries to pay their bills, increase their military spending as a percentage of GDP.
I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%.
But with war raging in Gaza, a fragile peace in Lebanon and instability in Syria, his remarks on the Middle East will cause real alarm.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
He vowed to take control of Greenland, where Don Jr. touched down earlier and spoke to his father by phone.
The welcome was spectacular. It's pretty amazing.
Well, that's great. Well, you go have a good time, everybody, and we're going to treat you well, and you know that, and just take care of yourselves.
The president-elect is refusing to rule out military or economic coercion in his pursuit of Greenland and the Panama Canal.
I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military.
He claimed the Panama Canal deal had cost Jimmy Carter the White House. The timing of his criticism unfortunate, as the late president's coffin was transported from Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, D.C. ahead of his state funeral later this week. Some might say this was vintage Trump, speaking off the cuff, or a negotiating tactic. But things do feel different this time. People seem resigned to the fact that he won the election and that they have to take what he says at face value. America is bracing for change, maybe more of it than expected.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring.
Donald Trump is back. The United States and the world holds its breath. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
So what to take then from Donald Trump's threats? In a moment, we'll hear from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. First, though, to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Deborah, as ever with Trump, the question is whether to take him at his word over his demands for radically higher military spending. Do NATO members?
When it comes to NATO and defence spending, then yes, they do, because he does have a valid point. The European allies have been freeloading off US security for way too long, and they know that they are going to have to ramp up investment even further. The head of NATO gave a warning just last month that they needed to turbocharge defence spending and get into a war mindset, but they are also going to be taking this threat about Greenland very seriously too. It belongs to Denmark. Denmark is a NATO ally. Where does that leave Article 5 when an aggressor potentially is actually a member state itself? So really worrying and difficult, challenging times for NATO.
And Alistair, Donald Trump's intemperate comments today certainly felt like they set a clock ticking in the Middle East. What do those there hope or fear he will do?
Well, it's not the first time that he's said that all hell will break loose, or words to that effect, in relation to the hostage crisis in Gaza. So we have heard it before, but what's not clear is the substance behind it. What could Donald Trump do to make good on that vow, particularly when you consider that the outgoing US administration, a lot of people will assess, have given Israel the support it needs to continue its fight in Gaza, to go to war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and to strike Iran. What I would say about Donald Trump is that people tend to say the lesson from his first premiership was to look at what he does, not what he says. But Donald Trump is unpredictable, and that unnerves leaders around the world, and especially here in the Middle East. And his unpredictability can often be quite effective in this region.
Alistair and Deborah, thanks to both of you. Well, one immediate impact of the incoming presidency of Donald Trump was seen in the world of high tech today. The founder of Facebook, now Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, confirmed his company will change the way it checks facts on its networks in the United States after years of claims from conservatives there that it is biased against them. Well, let's bring in our science and technology editor, Tom Clark. So, Tom, what exactly is Meta doing, and how is it relevant to the return of Donald Trump?
Well, what Mark Zuckerberg has announced is they're going to remove third-party fact-checkers from the platforms that they've been moderating in the United States up until now, and also relax some of the rules of some of the content that they use to control, examples, immigration, for example, and gender identity, things like that. He said it's about getting back to their roots and putting free speech first, but let's be clear, this is all about trying to build relationships with the incoming administration. He had Thanksgiving dinner at Mar-a-Lago. He's donated to the inaugural fund, and now this. And he pretty much admitted as much in the comments he made in his announcement today.
The problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. We've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
What impact it will have, it's hard to know. You know, Facebook doesn't have the political clout maybe it once did. You have to look for platforms like X for that, really. But is this part of a further slide in Silicon Valley, you know, capitulating towards MAGA Republicans? But more importantly, I think, what does it mean for facts? Let's face it, there's never really been a debate about how people express opinions online, but what has caused so much concern is the misinformation that we're seeing, a tidal wave of misinformation and disinformation, and how that has led in very recent years, you know, during the COVID pandemic, people lost their lives because of misinformation online about vaccines and alternative therapies, and the riots we saw over the summer here in the UK, we know for a fact were based on untruths about what was going on here. And I think that's what we're going to have to watch for, and it raises very profound questions about social media, but also for journalists doing jobs like we do, I think.
Very interesting. Tom, thank you. Well, it's not just the words of Donald Trump that are causing ructions right now. Of course, his ally, Elon Musk, has criticised Sir Keir Starmer as evil and his minister, Jess Phillips, as a rape genocide apologist over child sexual abuse grooming gangs. Well, tonight, she told Sky News that the world's richest man knows absolutely nothing about the subject and should crack on with getting to Mars. Our political correspondent, Liz Bates, has this report.
Should there be a national inquiry, Griffith Minister?
Arriving for the first cabinet meeting of the new year.
Should there be a national inquiry into grooming gangs, Foreign Secretary?
Sir Keir Starmer's top team confronted with a scandal decades in the making. Child sexual exploitation by grooming gangs.
Is Elon Musk dangerous?
And all because of this man, billionaire Trump ally Elon Musk, who blamed years of inaction on the Prime Minister and called Home Office Minister Jess Phillips a rape genocide apologist. Today, she responded.
It's a ridiculous statement. It's completely and utterly untrue. I've had men say worse things about me over the years, but what it makes me feel, when, you know, in the cold light of day, after you sort of dealt with how ridiculous it is and then the effect it's going to have on whether it's the next week of your life or how much of your life, you go back to, you can't be silenced by these people because you've got a job to do. Just, you know, crack on with this, getting to Mars. I have no... Elon Musk is going to Elon Musk. I've got bigger and more important things to be thinking about.
The Conservatives, accused of jumping on the Musk bandwagon, were adamant they have long supported a new grooming gang inquiry.
I know the media is obsessed by Elon Musk's tweets. I'm not interested
in that. So why weren't you shouting about this before Christmas?
I was. I called for, last year, full life sentences for perpetrators.
You didn't call for a full inquiry because your government had carried one out, which only now you're saying
I wasn't interested in this. I was. My record speaks for itself.
It's a Westminster row that has its origins 200 miles north in the Manchester town of Oldham. Councillors here, including independent Brian Hoban, have repeatedly called for a public inquiry. They were refused by the last Conservative government and again by Jess Phillips last year. He says survivors must come before politics.
There's something with the timing that doesn't sit right with me. I'm glad it's top of the agenda at the moment, but there's something that it makes me feel as though it's being politicised, and that's not for the good of the survivors.
But there's more party politics to come, with the Conservatives set to force a vote tomorrow in the Commons, leaving places like Oldham in the midst of a political standoff with no end in sight. Liz Bates, Sky News, Westminster.
And you can hear that full interview with Jess Phillips on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, which is out later this week. Now, the worst impacts of the severe winter weather were in the East Midlands today as residents and businesses dealt with flooding, which at one point was rated a threat to life. There were more than 300 flood warnings and alerts across England and Wales. It was in Leicestershire that danger to life flood warning, since downgraded, was first issued. A critical incident was declared by East Midlands Ambulance, with hospitals under pressure and widespread flooding. Commuters faced problems on major A roads, with high water levels forcing road closures. Some airports were forced to close temporarily too, or pause flights. The Met Office has issued new weather warnings for ice across northern England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And in Ireland, severe weather warnings cover most of the country, with temperatures expected to plummet to as low as -8 degrees. Our North of England correspondent, Caterina Vitozzi, spoke to some of the victims of the weather here in the UK.
Battered by rain and now by floods. The bad weather here feels unrelenting. Here in Lincolnshire, rescue teams have had call-out after call-out to reach the stuck and stranded.
Recovery services themselves, they can't cope. We went out to a chap yesterday and he'd been waiting for 11 hours for a recovery. And of course, at that point, it was also getting to a point it could have been a medical problem as well because it was so cold.
This is what the floods have done to Terry's house.
The fire brigade was here, asking us to want to be evacuated, but we decided to stay.
It's cold, wet, and now unlivable.
Devastated. Everything's gone.
In Leicestershire, authorities issued a threat to life warning, evacuating people here as floodwater quickly rose.
It's almost a year exactly to the day when these businesses behind me were flooded, and yet again they've had a night of trying to save stock and merchandise and lift it to higher ground, and a day today of counting the cost of what they've lost.
At this restaurant, they're waiting for the water to recede before they start yet another clean-up.
So hopefully when we get the alert, we'll find out if it's still rising. We can hope that the water decides to not rise anymore. But yeah,
And we're all getting these flood alerts, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
We've just been interrupted by that flood alert. I mean, how much warning did you get?
So we got a warning first thing this morning. That was the first alert that we actually got. Obviously, it was already rising levels last night and yesterday. Obviously, we got a weather alert regarding snow, but there was nothing regarding flooding until it was already pretty much on the path to being flooded.
Workers at this pub turned up for a staff party last night. It turned into a salvage mission.
Hopefully it can't get any worse, but we said that about 9 o'clock last night, it can't get worse, and it has. It's people's jobs, people can't go to work, we obviously won't be open today, or for, I'd have thought the next week or so, I don't know. I came in cream chinos for the staff party, and now I'm in shorts and wellies, so there's a slight change of plan.
Flood alerts remain across the East Midlands. Here, they're just hoping for a few drier days. Caterina Vitozzi, Sky News, Leicestershire.
Now, we heard earlier about the demands from Donald Trump for a big increase in defence spending from NATO members, including Britain. That looks increasingly difficult tonight for the government to achieve without breaching its spending rules after the UK's long-term cost of borrowing rose to its highest level since 1998. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, explains why that matters.
Did Rachel Reeves sail too close to the wind in the budget? And are the markets punishing her for it? Now, what you're looking at here is the cost of government borrowing. The higher the cost, the more debt interest must be paid by government, money that could be going on schools and hospitals. And it's changing, it actually changes by the minute, and it's going in the wrong direction. As of today, it's at a 27-year high, caused by lower growth and expectations that interest rates are going to be staying higher for longer. And all of this is making Rachel Reeves' life so much harder because she's hemmed in. In the first budget, the Labour Chancellor set herself a hugely ambitious target: no borrowing to fund day-to-day government spending. And over the last 20 years, well, that's not been achieved. Look at all of this above the 0% line, which is borrowing. Now, the official projection back last October say in a few years' time she'll just about meet her promises. But you can see it's only by the narrowest of margins. It's £9.9 billion of what's known as headroom, and that's nothing compared to the over £1 trillion of government spending. And today, analysts forecast that that headroom could now just be down to potentially around £1 billion. But the official verdict that matters comes when Rachel Reeves returns to the Commons on March the 26th, and then inside the Treasury, they know there's a real chance that she could have been judged to have breached her borrowing rules and that they would have to take immediate action. Now, I understand she's determined to stick to those tight borrowing limits. And in the Treasury, they know They know they cannot tax anymore. So there's only one choice. If that happens, they've got to squeeze any further growth in public spending in the years ahead. And this will be hard. Now, I want you to look at this. 30 years of government spending reviews. Normally, public spending goes up a healthy chunk each time there's one of these reviews. It did drop during the coalition years under the Tories and Liberal Democrats, but then went up again under Boris Johnson. Now, these are Rachel Reeves' plans. Generous this year, generous next year, but then down to comparatively historically low increases from 2026 onwards, just 1.3% here in those years. How can you cite even more from these wafer-thin increases without, for instance, breaking manifesto promises? Or could welfare be where they look to find some savings? Look at the budget here explode in the coming years, made up, and look at this, by big increases in the bill for working age benefits. And that, if they want to trim that, will be a big, tough battle for a Labour government. Now, Rachel Reeves has told us that she is the Iron Chancellor, but she's backed herself into a corner. She blames the Tories, but if there's further cuts or squeezes to public spending, will others be forgiving?
Sam Coates with that assessment there. At least 126 people have been killed after a strong earthquake struck Western China. The 7.1 magnitude quake struck the mountainous Tingri area in the autonomous region of Tibet just after 9 o'clock this morning, local time. The epicenter was 14 miles from Tibet's second largest city, Chagatsy, just north of the border with Nepal, and 50 miles northwest of Mount Everest. Our correspondent, Nicole Johnston, has this report.
In the heart of the Himalayas, an earthquake devastates remote mountain villages. The epicenter is Tingri, a county in China's majority Buddhist region of Tibet, and the number of dead is rising. The US reports the magnitude of the quake is 7.1. It is strong. This area is prone to earthquakes.
Because of the colliding between the Indian plate and the Eurasia plate, so a large amount of tectonic strain or energy has been accumulated, and then this energy will be released partly by earthquakes. Therefore, this region is earthquake prone.
Whole homes reduced to bricks. Many people are missing. And it is winter. The days are short. So too is the window for recovery. It's a desperate search to find people still alive, somewhere under all that rubble. And it is bitterly cold. At night, temperatures drop below freezing. Rescuers and soldiers scour the debris, backed up by drones, eyes in the sky for those hard-to-reach places.
Our next priority is to visit each village, as the affected area is quite extensive. We aim to understand the disaster situation in each village and locate trapped individuals to provide preliminary reports for the larger rescue teams.
There's been aftershocks, many of them, one after the other. And tremors too, in India, Nepal and Bhutan. The whole region is on edge. Mountain roads need to be cleared, and the challenge ahead is formidable. On this so-called rooftop of the world, the Earth has delivered a tremendous shock, and the days ahead will be hard going. Nicole Johnston, Sky News.
A search and rescue operation is underway for two British hikers who've been missing in the Dolomites in northern Italy for almost a week. 35-year-old Samuel Harris and 36-year-old Aziz Ziriat were last heard from on New Year's Day. They missed their flight home to the UK yesterday. The search for the men has been hampered by poor weather and the risk of an avalanche. The Biden administration has tonight accused Sudan's Rapid Support Forces militia and its allies of committing genocide in the civil war, which has killed tens of thousands of people. It's accused them of direct attacks against civilians, including infants. The US has imposed sanctions on the group's leaders. The French President Emmanuel Macron has led tributes in Paris to mark 10 years since the terror attack at the offices of the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. A minute's silence was held in honour of the 12 people who lost their lives when Islamist terrorists stormed the magazine's building. And for our final story on Sky News at 10 tonight, we remain in France. The country is remembering in radically different ways the former far-right leader and founder of the National Front, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who has died at the age of 96. His daughter could end up being the country's next president, and her party paid tribute to Marine Le Pen's father as a voice of the people. Millions of others, though, remembered him differently, and some celebrated on the streets of Paris tonight. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons has more.
Jean-Marie Le Pen was variously loved, hated and feared. A man who delighted in provoking fury and changed the political landscape of France. As one of the founders of the National Front, he focused on a range of scapegoats, including migrants, Muslims and the European Union. And it resonated with some. He ran for president 5 times, always losing, but once finishing as runner-up. His views inflammatory. Le Pen said the Holocaust was merely a detail of history, and he was convicted multiple times of inciting racial hatred. He assaulted a fellow MEP in the European Parliament, said AIDS victims should be kept in isolation, and complained that France's World Cup winning football squad contained too many non-white players. He stood down as leader in 2011, succeeded by his daughter Marine, who tried to soften the National Front's image and changed its name. But her father's shadow has always lingered.
His impact is still very great today. It's not just Jean-Marie Le Pen. There's the impact of Marine Le Pen, his daughter, who changed the party, mainly in its structures, its symbols and the way it communicates. For everything else, basically, it has remained generally faithful to the ideals of the National Front as Jean-Marie Le Pen designed it when the party was formed.
Now known as National Rally, a statement from the party said, he proved to be a visionary, sparking public debate around the major subjects which structure political life today, such as immigration, globalisation, French sovereignty, and the risk of being weakened by the European Union. Marine Le Pen was abroad when her father died. Her popularity has long since eclipsed his. From the presidential palace, a short, cold statement. A historical figure of the far right, he played a role in the public life of our country for nearly 70 years, which is now subject to the judgment of history. There are plenty who are celebrating his death. A harsh reaction in line with his own caustic character. Jean-Marie Le Pen was divisive, to some a trailblazer of the far right, to others a long-lived vial of human poison. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
Well, let's take you to California now, and some extraordinary footage we're seeing. As you can see, this is Pacific Palisades, the hillsides around LA under attack by this fire. Fast-moving, we're told, life-threatening, destructive windstorm hitting Southern California today, fanning the blaze, which has been seen for miles while traffic out of the area was jammed, as you might expect, as residents tried to flee, certainly subsuming now those residents' homes. Firefighters scrambling to corral this wildfire in the Los Angeles hillsides, dotted with celebrity homes, as what they're calling a potentially life-threatening, destructive windstorm hits Southern California. Keep you abreast of those latest pictures throughout the evening here on Sky News. Forecasters warning the worst may yet be to come, with the windstorm predicted to last for days, producing isolated gusts which could top 100 miles an hour in the mountains and foothills of this area. One home gone, no doubt more to come. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the columnist and broadcaster, Steve Richards, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. Lovely to see both of you. Hello to you. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the eye. Its headline, social media giants defy the UK crackdown on online safety. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. Speaking ahead of his inauguration, Donald Trump has called on NATO countries to spend far greater amounts of their budgets on defence. He also demanded the release of Israeli hostages by Hamas and said the Gulf of Mexico will be renamed the Gulf of America. The Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, has told Sky News that Elon Musk's remarks about her are ridiculous. The billionaire called her a rape genocide apologist while demanding an inquiry into UK grooming gangs. And firefighters in Los Angeles are battling wildfires caused by what they say is a potentially life-threatening, destructive windstorm in the area. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So to the front pages then, let us start with the Financial Times. It leads on Meta's decision to end its third-party fact-checking programme in the US and instead rely on its users to flag misinformation. The front of the Eye also featuring that story, writing that the social media giant is defying the UK's online safety crackdown. Meta's move towards the fact-checking system piloted by the platform X, also the lead for The Guardian. The Telegraph leads on a story from a whistleblower accusing the SAS of executing Afghan civilians, including children, in evidence given to a public inquiry. The Daily Mail leads on the NHS as multiple hospitals say their A&Es are in crisis as flu cases spike. The Metro leads with the Labour Party's apology for their TikTok promo using a song with controversial lyrics. A chilling story on the front of the Daily Express, which says Britain is in store for the coldest night in 4 years. In other news, The Sun carries an exclusive that actress Charlotte Jordan is leaving Coronation Street, the fifth star to leave the cobbles in a month, the paper tells us. And the Star Splash brings us essential advice from actor Brian Blessed on how to survive in the event of a Yeti attack. Don't forget to scan the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme. You can check out those front pages while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Steve and to Salma. Lovely to see you both. Happy New Year. Is it getting too late for that? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, what an interesting day of news it was as we look ahead to tomorrow as well. The Eye, first of all, social media giants defying a UK crackdown on online safety. This is at least in the States, is it not? This is Meta, owner of Facebook, Insta and so on. How significant do you think it is that they're ditching fact-checking in their normal way?
Well, I mean, there's a sort of theme running through a lot of the stories we're going to be looking at today, which is the imminent arrival of Donald Trump. And I can't think of a president on the eve of taking power who has had this kind of impact. When you look back at the weeks before Clinton took over or Obama, everything is revolving around him, it seems, with weeks to go before he goes back into the White House. And this is one example of Facebook and the owner trying to adapt to what Trump wants to see, what Trump regards as, in inverted commas, free speech. It's going to worry a lot of people here. I have to say, I'm so used to the media being an unreliable narrator, whether it's newspapers, obviously Sky News, always reliable.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we navigate through unreliable newspapers and all the rest of it. I can't get as worked up about this as I think many will, who will see this as very sinister. I think it's people trying to adapt to the arrival of Trump and let's see the consequences. I mean, speech at the moment is wild anyway, and I wonder how much more wilder it will get with this.
Yes, well, on this still, until we get to the other matters that Trump spoke about, you know, has the wild west of online and the internet just got wilder? What does it mean for liberal, fact-based reporting? And what does it mean about the polarisation of where people get their online news from?
Well, I think I agree with Steve's assessment that part of this is about modifying and moderating for a new president. You know, Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump have not had the best relationship previously. There's something slightly sort of pushing at the boundaries, I think, with the word defy in this headline, because they can't defy laws that have been set down in this country, so the Online Safety Act, for example, and the Digital Services Act in the EU. So there is still going to have to be some level of content moderation. You referenced something which is the Wild West of the internet. Now, that is something that charity campaigners have used themselves. And on the front page of the Eye, parents and campaigners who have struggled and suffered as consequences of algorithms, you know, children taking their own lives as a consequence of things that they're seeing. I don't think that they are going to settle for this kind of content moderation. However, having said that, some of the community note stuff on X, formerly known as Twitter, has worked well. It is better than having a company with its own kind of processes deciding what it might want to do with content. There are different kinds of ethical questions that come up all the time. But I will say that part of this really is about the quality of the content that is being produced and pushed out there on social media. And it is heartening that, you know, news organisations like Sky, you know, things with proper journalistic practices, is content that is still shared on these platforms. So I don't think we can just rule out, you know, this one statement as being the end. I agree with that, but I think there are reasons to worry and there are reasons to be cautious.
It's very sort of layered. It's, you know, how does an individual country regulate against an international media organisation? I mean, Salma was telling me when she worked in the Home Office, she was involved in drawing up. What was the bill you were involved in?
It was the Online Safety Act that it eventually became the Online Safety Act, but we did start the process.
So how does the UK regulate when Facebook is this massive international thing? Same with X. But, you know, you can lower it down. I mean, how do you regulate a British media? There's a huge, endless debate about whether Ofcom is effective or powerful enough and whether newspapers should be regulated and how. So there's a really ongoing debate about that. But I think the context at the moment is so highly charged with Musk and X and, you know, all the other things going on.
Almost the biggest concern is that people will seek their news from the echo chamber of their own interests, and therefore polarisation just increases. Isn't that kind of where is sort of the juggernaut that we're heading in, or are you not concerned about that?
Well, I'm really concerned about it, but I've always been concerned about it. I mean, let's go back 10 years, Tories read the Daily Mail and they were in their own echo chamber. You know, Labour people read the Guardian or the Mirror. So I think this has always gone on. It's just now on this bigger scale with social media. Yeah. So there's a lot to worry about, but I suppose I've always been worried, actually, about the impact of the media on our lives. So I'll just still be worried.
Yeah, exactly. And just very quickly, in this statement from Zuckerberg, he also suggested that his content moderation teams would move from California to Texas, where there's less concern about the bias of our team. So that's another interesting move, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's go to the economy, shall we? Salma, Reeves's headroom shrinking. The whole point is that borrowing is extremely high, back to the era of 1998, if anyone can remember that far back.
Yes, and the consequence of this, obviously, is that an already pressured state is about to become even more pressured. So previously, when we have been on this programme and talked about the implications of the budget and whether Rachel Reeves is going to have to come back to raise more taxes, that shadow is looming larger today, I think, as a consequence of this story.
So if borrowing costs go up, the Treasury, it costs more money to borrow and therefore to run services.
Well, it basically means that we can't borrow anymore without it being more expensive, and also our debt interest repayments will go up as well. So eventually, you're actually just paying taxes to pay off the stuff that you borrowed previously.
It's the biggest story of tonight, really, because if Rachel Reeves' room for manoeuvre is further constrained, what does she do to raise money? And I look back at when you were all in 2010. And the borrowing was so cheap, and George Osborne decided not to borrow to spend on capital investment. Now it's really expensive, and they want to but it's becoming really expensive to do it. And so I think it's a very big story, this.
Yeah, well, not least when you look at the front page of the Daily Mail.
Exactly.
A&E in crisis. The demand on public services simply does not go away. You know, flu cases are spiking. I'm sure we all know people who've been, you know, really poorly with whatever it is that's going round. The point is public services will always be a drain on our resources, and yet Labour wants to fix the foundations to spend more money on them.
Well, and also the difficulty here is that you can talk a really good game about reform and it's all theoretical until you're actually hit with this kind of crisis. So, you know, everybody talks about the winter crisis that affects the NHS. Here it is in practice. Here it is when you think about, you know, a post-pandemic as well, where we're a little bit more aware of the kind of features that occur here. You've got 5,000 beds being taken up a day by something that's been hit, that's new, that's outside of what's been planned for, and medical teams actually trying to reprise some of the rules that we had during the pandemic with mask wearing to sort of stop infection. So there is a sort of upside in that we still have current learnings from it. But, you know, reform is fine theoretically until the urgent takes over and you are limited with what you're left with in terms of resource and capacity within things like the NHS.
Yes, and I spoke to a GP last week that said the cold weather genuinely does exacerbate respiratory illnesses. Takes us to the front page of the Eye as well. The epidemic, the flu epidemic, they say, hitting hospitals as the UK battles widespread flooding. Patients face a 50-hour A&E wait. School shutters, weather sparks, travel chaos. What is this? Is this an all-round misery story, is it, in the front page of the Eye?
There's not many laughs in these stories. But it shows, again, the complexity of things at the moment. So the Mail splashes on the crisis, which the Eye references, with the implication that you need more resources to deal with it, more beds, more people, so the waiting in A&E is not 50 hours, etc. But if they put up taxes to pay for it again, it would be on the front of the Mail saying, outrage, taxes have gone up. So, and she can't borrow. In fact, her fiscal rules rule out, I think, borrowing for current day-to-day spending. So governing at the moment is really difficult.
Yeah, Selma, rock and a hard place, it sounds, for the Chancellor.
Well, yes, but it's also, we have to remember, it's not just about the decision that the Chancellor makes in terms of spending. Yes, it is hard to govern, and she is faced with really difficult choices. But really, it's about where you're going to find the marginal gains. Do you have the best type of leadership in these hospitals that are driving the kind of reform and efficiencies in those services? Do you have the best kind of people on the ground who are giving you the best advice on flood warnings and being able to, you know, go back up to DEFRA to make some of the better choices strategically? And it's not the interesting, sexy stuff, you know, about big budgets and big reform and the things that's going to get headlines. It's actually very boring technocratical stuff that might change what we have here, but you have to have the patience to care about that.
Yeah, but that is a kind of reform in itself, isn't it? Because if people on the front line are more, not so much the front line, but the organisers, those responsible for provision, were more accountable for what happened, I think the quality of provision would rise. But that's a reform.
Yes, but
that's a reform.
But
this word
reform
is around all over the place.
But it can't just be about middle management. This is the thing. We have to have good quality management in this country, in our public services. Yeah. You cannot run a nation from Whitehall, and it's not just about devolution and mayors and more politicians. You know, that is never the answer, in my view, having worked in politics for such a long time. You need people who really understand this stuff and are heard when that advice, when good advice is brought up and not ignored.
I agree with all of that, but remember, it's the politicians who raise the money, and therefore they must have some responsibility for how it is spent and some accountability for how it is spent. So what you do after that, yeah, get the best people in, but there will always be that line back to politicians.
Okay.
However,
lots more to come. We mentioned Donald Trump already, haven't we? He is refusing to rule out seizing Greenland. That and more to come in just a moment.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over 50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem. Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards, and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. So, Donald Trump and Elon Musk dominating, one might say, the news agenda. Let's go to the front page of the Guardian, Steve. Refusing to rule out seizing Greenland. I mean, purchasing it is one thing, but using economic coercion or military force is quite another.
Yeah, I think this is, there's been quite a lot of speculation in this, as we were saying earlier, Trump-obsessed phase before he gets to the White House, that he will be different this time round. And I just look at all the evidence and think he's going to be exactly the same as the first time round. And this is an example. I mean, we've been trying to work out whether there was some sort of legitimate claim over Greenland, and that there isn't, but there he is, claiming this will be in Greenland's interest for America to take it over. Hasn't he claimed he's going to take over the Panama Canal? Whenever I hear... He said
it was built for the American military.
Built for the American military. Whenever I hear the word canal, I know there's trouble ahead. Suez Canal and blah, blah, blah. Now, now he's going to claim the Panama Canal, and it always causes global seismic tremors. And,
but it is about trade routes partly, isn't it? And it's
it
about
always is,
military strategic routes as well, which is why Greenland as an island is so important, and the resources on there as well.
There's a logic to everything that Trump says. It might not be a logic that we all follow, but there is a logic to what he is saying and what he's doing. The issue is, to be serious for a moment, because, to be honest, not ruling out force to take Greenland is deeply unserious. But it is the fact that he is not beholden, or certainly in these sort of statements and phrases, he doesn't seem beholden to the natural world order.
No, but how can you stop China taking Taiwan if you're threatening to take Greenland?
This
and then that becomes extremely globally important.
This is exactly the issue. So we are expecting the US to use its force to intervene on issues like Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We are asking the US to use its force and its influence in the Middle East, in the conflict in the Middle East. We expect real seismic issues if China does go to Taiwan or tries to use force in Taiwan. How can we expect those things if the incoming president is talking about, or rather not ruling out using force to take land that does not belong to US...
Well, Greenland, even Denmark says, belongs to the Greenlanders. They've had that power since quite recently, but it's been part of Denmark for over 600 years, 57,000 people only on it, vast mineral resources, strategically important for the US military. Donald Trump Jr. is paying a private visit there right now. I mean, he seems, more serious than he was when he first mentioned this back in 2019. But one of many things he said today, not least spending for NATO, should be at 5%.
See, that in a way, that's bigger than the other two things. This is not going to happen. Now, he is a bargain...
But he's a maximalist demand kind of guy, isn't he?
He's trying to do deals and will settle for less. But it just shows the pressure. I mean, Britain's going to struggle to get to 2.5%. 5% will not happen. So.
Let's go to the Daily Star. Also, the ally, Elon Musk. There we go. Blah, 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 the headline.
This is terrible, but we decided to look at the story because we enjoyed the headline on the Star so much. There is nothing to add to it, I'm afraid, Anna, apart from blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, well, actually, you can say that, or accusing the British Prime Minister of being evil when you're part of the American administration. We are already at extraordinary, point of history, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. And if you think about the news agenda here now, he, blah, 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 he has been shaping it over the last few days. It's quite extraordinary. I love the way they put page 5 there, as if there's more blahs on page 5.
We need to count how many. We'll come back to you on that, I think, won't we? Steve, Salma, as ever, thank you. We'll see you for more at 11. Here is the weather. A northerly flow will keep it cold this week with wintry showers and extensive frosts. Most places will start tomorrow dry with a widespread sharp frost bringing icy stretches. The north will see wintry showers. Expect some dense freezing fog too, especially over Ireland and Northern Ireland. Plenty of sunshine through the morning. Fog will linger in places. The south will cloud over. Rain will clip England's south coast, which will turn to snow as it moves inland across the windy southwest. Also, further wintry showers in the north, mainly across northern Scotland. Very cold, especially where fog lingers. The afternoon will bring more of the same rain, sleet and snow, edging across more of southern England. Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. More on Donald Trump's call for NATO countries to spend far greater amounts of their budgets on defence and all the other matters he raised in tonight's news conference.